I've been sitting alongside the president of the Maldives, a good friend, and he repeatedly brought attention to the situation of the island states in Copenhagen. We had dinner with Her Majesty Queen Margarita and many heads of state, but after the event we went to a room to sit down to discuss until 3 or 4 a.m. And I can describe what I saw there in that room. There were constant reproaches made by one group against others. There were developing countries who quite properly were blaming the developed countries because, historically speaking, they'd increased carbon emissions through their industrial development. They were quite right. But other states were saying, even though developed states managed to get down to zero carbon emissions, that wouldn't be even remotely enough to halt global warming. They were also right. As developing states grow, we are going to issue greenhouse gases ourselves. We'll all be worsening the problem. And the sad and paradoxical thing is that the smaller the states, the more vulnerable they are. They haven't, in the past or today, are emitting gases. They are not just vulnerable, they're on the point of disappearance. I think we need new terms. The meeting continued not just that night. It's been going on all year. In fact, it's been going on for 16 COPs now. And a thought occurs to me. Sometimes I think in this respect we fail to understand that we're all passengers in the same vessels. We're all passengers in the same aircraft or the same vehicle. And our aircraft has now seen the disappearance of the pilot. Something happened in the cabin. And all the passengers are responsible for the aircraft, and we're squabbling about these matters, whether the guilt lies with those in the tourist class or those sitting up front in first class, and the plane continues to go down. It's as if we were in a truck on a winding road, and the driver has had a heart attack, and we're all there on the edge of hitting a tree, going over into a ravine and squabbling again. So I think, friends, somebody has to take control of the aircraft and put on the brakes. I think the first key thing is to take control and then to steer the process for emissions reduction and stop the discussions among our ranks about matters however valuable they may be. I think we have to reduce emissions so that global warming is not more than 1.5. But the logical thing would be to stop global warming altogether, to get down to zero. However, the worst scenario isn't to reach 2%. The worst is what Lord Nicholas Stern said yesterday. If we don't do anything, we will reach 5 degrees of warming. And it's not just the island states. The majority of our states will be on the verge of disappearance. Whether we go whether it's to be 1 or 5 or 2, let us try to get control of the truck, control of the aircraft, stabilize things. Only that way will we be able to not just refine the targets, but the instruments which we need. And a last thought. We've been very, very focused on targets, 2 degrees, 1.5, 4, whatever. I think that what is key is to focus on the methods, on the specific practical instruments here and now to reach those targets. Ultimately, what we need to do is to apply all the instruments to the maximum to cut the emissions. We'll reach the brakes and press those down to the floor. We have to do that. In Cancun, I hope that in addition to endorsing the targets, and we can start right now to looking at those instruments, the buses, brakes, the controls of the aircraft. And what are those? The resources that needs to come on tap now so that countries don't delay implementation of the grief fund. We need the $28 billion which put to use now, particularly in the most vulnerable countries. The Red Plus mechanisms should come online now as part of the effort, so that if you've got a deforested forest in Africa or Central America or Asia, you can reforest it and thereby reduce emissions, so that discussions about a price for carbon gets underway now within national context. These are the instruments, and I think that's the path to follow. Taking control of the truck, taking the rudder and starting to apply the brakes isn't the problem. We don't know which curve we're going to crash in. We need to get back the control which we lost a long time ago. Let us do that. Let us take that step. Let us be practical where we can be practical, which implies not resignation or renunciation with respect to focus on the fact that this is the only world we've got. The island states and everyone's countries should last reasonably and be fit for living in forever. This is the target, but today let us act, because I don't think that radical pretext or all or nothing postures shouldn't provide a legitimate, a proper excuse for those who don't want to cooperate to spend one further year of discussions fighting and squabbling among the passengers in that single truck, that single bus, that single aircraft which is on the point of crashing. We need to get control back over the vessel. Thank you all very much, Mr. Presidents, Prime Ministers and guests.